One simple way to be less self-conscious is to be others conscious. And think to yourself, how many things have you done for somebody else that you would have felt uncomfortable potentially doing for yourself?
Are you focused on adding value? Are you focused on growth and becoming more valuable so you can add more value? Or are you so busy focused on looking good that it actually is at the expense of your own fulfillment because now you're not serving?
Next Level Nation, welcome back to another episode of Next Level University, where we teach you how to level up your life, your love, your health, and your wealth. We hope you enjoyed our latest episode. It was episode number 1328, How to Start Building Self-Trust. We did a little bit of a pivot. So today, for episode number 1329, we are going to do one simple way to be less self-conscious. We were going to talk about money. We're going to push that episode so we can make sure it's as valuable as humanly possible. So one simple way to be less self-conscious. If you're a human being, in some way, shape, or form, in some arena of life, you probably have some self-conscious tendencies. I remember Alan and I, this was back in the day. This is like one of the first origin stories of the Hyperconscious podcast back in the day. We went to an event in Arizona, and that was like my first time really traveling like we were traveling. I was super overwhelmed. There was a lot going on. But we landed in, what's the Arizona airport? Do you know? Whatever Arizona's airport is. Something international
Phoenix?
Airport. Yeah, maybe Phoenix International Airport. That sounds good. Sounds real. And we got off the plane, and their airport, if I remember correctly, is pretty large. And we were walking down this ramp, and there was this gentleman in front of us that was very clearly a business person. He dressed very nicely, had a briefcase, had a suitcase, had a nice backpack. And something happened, and he dropped all of his paperwork on the floor. And Alan and I stopped to help him because he was in front of us, and it was like, wow, that really sucks. And it's like kind of windy in this tunnel, so the stuff could blow all over the place. So we stopped and we helped this guy. And a lot of other people just walked by, and maybe they're in a rush or whatever. And it's very interesting because if I had dropped something, I probably would have gotten super self-conscious. I probably would have thought to myself, oh my goodness, I'm in these people's ways. I probably look like an idiot. People are going to laugh at me. I would have gotten self-conscious. But I wasn't self-conscious at all when I was helping this person because I was focused on being others conscious. It wasn't about me, right? I've told this story a million times where Amy and I went to the mall. So new listeners, Amy, longtime listener in the early days, OG Amy, she wanted to overcome her fear of starting conversations with strangers. So her and I went to the mall to have conversations with strangers. That is something if I did by myself, I would have been super self-conscious of. But since I was there with somebody else, since I was trying to add value to somebody else's life, I was more others conscious of Amy. And that day changed her life and my life forever. So one simple way to be less self-conscious is to be others conscious. And think to yourself, how many things have you done for somebody else that you would have felt uncomfortable potentially doing for yourself? That's a really good frame. And I can't think of a better story than the Arizona experience because I remember thinking, and I think we did an episode on it years ago, why didn't I feel self-conscious? Why didn't I feel embarrassed? Why didn't I feel uncomfortable helping that person out? But if I was in his position, I probably would have felt all the things that I didn't feel. I think we did a hyper-conscious episode on that back in the day.
Mm-hmm. I do remember you telling that story. So there's one sort of frame that I want to look through for this episode. And I whenever I have any sort of like resistance and fear, I try to treat fear like a green light, not a red light. So I'll actually use the analogy of the yellow light here. And the reason why is because my concern is that it won't land, but bear with me here. There's two humans that I know. I'm going to keep it completely anonymous as always, and I'm going to describe both. One of these people at a very, very high level is extremely others conscious. They are trying to add value to every room they go in. They are such a bright light. They are so much more than other people really know. And they're constantly focused on how they can serve. How can I serve? How can I serve? How can I make the room better? How can I get you something? How can I teach you something? How can I ask you a question to get you contemplating? How can I add value? And this person is a very, very bright light, a very, very wonderful person. I can't think of a negative thing to say about this person, quite frankly. There's another person in my life who isn't a huge fan of this other person. And what I find fascinating, and this is why I was scared to share this, what I found really fascinating is that this other person is a lot more self-conscious. They're not really nearly as focused as at adding value to others. Now, they're still focused on adding value to others, don't get me wrong, but they tend to be a little bit more narcissistical. They tend to be a little bit more self-conscious. They tend to make things a little bit more about them, and they tend to be a little bit more attention-seeking. And what I think is interesting is that this person who's focused on service ends up getting more attention. The person who's focused on status is jealous of the person focused on service. And, what I think is really interesting about this is that when you're focused on adding value and when you're focused on serving, you tend to be less self-conscious and you actually end up getting what a lot of people might envy. And bear with me on this. All right. So, Kev, you and I do coaching, we do consulting, we do training, we do speaking, we do podcasting. And a lot of people would be envious of some of the attention that we get. And that's okay. That's okay. I think in the past, I would have been envious of some of the attention we're getting. Okay? But what I think is interesting, I remember one time you asked me, what are you thinking about when you go into a bar? Because you were scared. You were very self-conscious at the bar. You're a shorter guy. It's not where you're valued. Right? And you have that thing about like opening a door and it not opening, being embarrassed, that whole thing. And I remember telling you, I'm not thinking about myself at all. Like, what are you thinking about? Are you thinking about like, I'm the man or blah, blah, blah? No, I'm just not thinking about myself at all. I'm thinking about how do I help others have fun? Back in my party days, for lack of better phrasing, that was my main focus, is how do I make sure everyone, our whole group, has the most fun? Because everything else, I think, is a byproduct of that. Status, I think, is a byproduct of that. Being a leader is a byproduct of that. So my goal was to serve others. My goal walking into a bar was to have as much fun as I possibly could and make sure my friends have as much fun as we possibly can and to facilitate a great experience. And I used to be really good at that. I used to host a lot of parties, both at home and in college, high school, all that. But here's my point. This other person that I'm referring to, she's that same way. She's extremely good at facilitating a great experience for everyone else, sometimes at the detriment of herself. But this other person who really does want status and really deep down wants to be more valued, what she doesn't understand is that she can't be more valued than that other person because that other person is adding so much value. And so if anyone's out there right now and they have any level of envy whatsoever, and just own it, it's okay, of maybe some of the attention that Kevin gets, do you also want to add 1,329 episodes worth of value in order to get that? And so what I find this weird duality, Kev, the people who are the most self-conscious often become even more self-conscious because they're self-conscious. Here's my thought. First of all, you'll never not be self-conscious. Everyone is. It's just to what extent. Okay, so 0 to 10, Kev, how self-conscious are you right now?
Like 1.
1, okay. Okay, when we first recorded, you and me, the very first episode, how self-conscious were you?
Oh, man. I definitely had an ego as a protector, but I was probably like an 8.
Okay. So you're never not going to be self-conscious, but you will get less self-conscious as you become more others conscious. Your focus right now is on serving the listeners. Your focus right now is on me and making sure that I'm serving the listeners, right? And that's beautiful. That's why you're not worried about what's on your face right now. Like Kev could easily have a big zit or whatever. We're not concerned about that because our attention, our focus is on adding value. And this weird, interesting thing happens. What I've noticed from coaching so many different people is that the people who really are self-conscious end up being envious of the people who aren't, because the people who aren't are others conscious and they're adding more value, and they're the ones who end up getting status. They're the ones who end up getting attention. Because when you're pouring into the lives of other people, you get, you're a leader. You get recognition unconsciously. And so imagine the person at the party, this is the analogy, that is just adding value. What can I get you? What do you need? How can I serve? What kind of music do you want? Okay, I'll do the playlist, whatever. That person's going to end up building the most relationships. That person's going to end up shining the most. They're going to be the one who everyone wants to dance with. And then if you're over there in the corner, self-conscious, feeling bad about yourself, you're going to be jealous. I used to say this in college. I was focused on having fun and dancing, and a lot of guys don't dance. I always say beware of the drunk, miserable man in the corner with a beer in his hand, because he's going to lash out at you. He's like upset with you because all the girls are dancing with you. And so
never been my experience. So you know what I
mean? Well, I think that you were self-conscious, right?
Definitely.
And that's okay. That's
Definitely.
okay. But that's kind of my point, is that if you do shift this, if you focused on service instead of status, if you focused on service and others' consciousness instead of looking good, feeling good, being better than, what's ironic about that is you end up better than, you end up looking better, you end up getting status. The goal is not status. The goal is adding massive value and becoming more growth and contribution. When growth and contribution is the goal, you will inevitably become less and less and less self-conscious.
I did a pre-call yesterday to be on a podcast, and many good hosts, not everybody, but many good hosts will say, "Is there anything off limits?" You run a lot of podcasts, you know that. We would ask guests when we had them on, "Is there anything off limits? No fly zones? Anything we can't ask you?" And I always say no. They don't even finish the question. Is there anything off? And I just say, no, I'm good. I'm an open book, whatever. And again, I've done enough episodes to understand that I can always stop myself from saying something if I don't want to say it. Doesn't mean I won't allow you to ask. I just will have a pivot, or maybe I won't go all the way into the story if I don't feel comfortable sharing. But to your point, the reason is because I want to add value. I'm not very... This is the interesting thing. And I never understood this, and I still don't fully understand it. I think I understand it more than I ever have. There are so many clips of me on the interwebs. I mean, there's 1,330 episodes of this, however many other shows. Very rarely do I get off an interview and am I self-conscious. The time it happens is when I see old content and my studio setup is garbage, because it's not as valuable. It doesn't represent who I am today. That's part of it. And then the other time is when it's like, it's just not a great interview. I went on an interview the other day. It just wasn't that great. I don't know. The connection with me and the host was off a little bit. There was a lot going on behind the scenes. There was somebody in the room. It was just a whole thing. But when I get off there, I was like, that's not gonna be very good. So I think that's the interesting thing, is it's like,
was the host self-conscious instead of others conscious?
Probably more so than a typical interview. Probably, yeah.
Hello, my name is Eddie Pinero. I'm the founder of Your World Within, and I wanted to take a second and just express how valuable working with Alan has been. His ability to help me create clarity and maintain focus on my big picture goals has been huge. He's been a huge asset with the roadmap as well. The day-to-day things, the little things that we sometimes overlook. I think anyone looking to, grow themselves, grow a business or both, would truly benefit from having Alan as an ally along the way. Again, great mind, but more importantly, solid dude.
There's a big correlation between a great interview and how others focused the guest is. So our favorite interview, Phil M. Jones. It's very clear that his only goal was to add value. Whereas we did other interviews where it was like to network or to sell their book or whatever. And I think that that's this principle. Now, the last piece I want to share is that if you're always others conscious and you're always in service, that can be martyrdom. That can be at the expense of you. So you do need to take care of you as well. Of course. So putting yourself first prior to the front-facing thing is important. And this is the way that I do it, and you don't have to do this, but for me, I start my day serving self. So the first third of my day is for me, the second third is for service, and the third is for fitness, food, and family, and R&R. And I do that on purpose because when I'm on these microphones, I'm not thinking about how I feel. I don't even feel well. I need to go to the bathroom. Like, this has nothing to do with me. I want people to understand this. Really, I want this to land. This us recording this has nothing to do with Kevin and I. Even the stories we are telling about our own lives are only to add value to you as a listener. We are here for the listener. Very first opening of the day one of a business seminar we went to down in Florida. Worst business seminar of all time. Business is about making money, period. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. That is not true. That is not even remotely true. Business is about serving others for a profit. See how different that is? If business is just about making money, go sell cigarettes. Same idea with self-conscious versus others conscious. You are not here for you. I am not here for just me. You, Kev, you're not here for just you. You're supposed to serve yourself. You're supposed to serve your wife. You're supposed to serve your community. You're supposed to serve the world. So am I. We are all better together. I've been doing hashtag better together way more. The people who are the most self-conscious, and I've been there too. I remember my self-conscious days. I was red-faced. I was short. I was pudgy. I didn't hit puberty. I remember my sister was the most popular girl in the high school, and I was just a freshman absolute loser. And I remember it was so bad. It was so bad. And I dug in and I did hard work. And I tried to get better, and I tried to increase my own value, and I tried to add more value. And I've been doing that paradigm ever since. And it compounds. And eventually you end up with all those things when that was never about that. You know, if you start a business in the service of others where you're truly trying to help people, you're going to end up way more successful than the business that's just about money. Eventually. In the beginning, you won't. So be careful of that.
Well, but I think that's the other interesting thing too, is when you get made fun of, or when you get poked fun at for chasing your goals or your dreams or whatever, it's far easier for you to weather that when you realize it's not about me. That's the thing, is like, if you're calling me out, you're not really calling me out. Yeah, I chose the podcast, cool, but it's not about me. You know, I say that all the time. Trust me, if I wanted to start something to be financially free, it wouldn't have been a podcast, it would have been something else. Now, especially now, knowing how hard it's been to do this, but that's the other part of it, is like, yeah, it's never been about us.
Can you share your thoughts on that? Because you've been on a lot of podcasts. Can you tell the difference? I could always tell the difference when I went on other shows. Like, is this for you or is this for your listeners? You can always tell. People can feel intentions. It's unconscious, but they can feel them. Yeah.
I'm blessed because a lot of the shows, I mean, most of the shows I go on are self-improvement, 99% of the time. 99.9% of the time, honestly. And most of the hosts are emotionally driven humans. So they're heart driven. Yeah, I find that most of them are very, very others conscious.
Can you give us an example of an interview where it was very clearly about them?
Oh, there's always this interesting part in an interview, depending on who you're talking with, where the energy shifts and you're like, there's a sales pitch coming. And I was on a show. We finished. It was a decent interview. It was okay. It wasn't great, wasn't terrible. And we got to the end and the person said, "What can I do for you?" And I was like, okay. I was like, "Nothing, really. Like, we're good. I'm good. Everything's good." I always say, just keep doing what you're doing. That's what I said. That's what you can do for me. Keep doing what you're doing. That's it. I'm not here for anything. And this person said, I only do this podcast so I can network with people. Like, I don't even really care about the listeners. It's like, okay. You and I we're not in the same. And again, you do you, but that's not why I started this. It's not why I started this. I had an interesting interaction the other day. How much time do we have? And I don't mean anything negative by this, but it's interesting how you don't take things personally when they're not about you. So somebody reached out to us and said, "Hey, I'd love to have one of you, Alan or Kev, on this summit I'm doing." And we are kind of weary about those things because oftentimes there's stuff that comes with it. Like, I need you to send this out to your email list or get a bunch of people to sign up, whatever it is. And this was a great human being. It seemed like they had really good heart behind what they were doing. And we're chatting and, he's asking me questions and I'm giving him answers. And he said, "Are you good to promote this on your email list?" And I was like, "Well, it depends on what we're doing." And he's like, well, we'll talk about that more. He's like, how big is your email list? And I was like, I don't know. It's not a focus of ours. We're not focused on building an email list so we can send people emails to get them to buy stuff. Like, that's not what we're doing. He's like, well, you need to have at least 5,000 people. And I was like, we do not have 5,000 people. That I can assure you of. And he's like, well, unfortunately, this isn't going to work out then, because that's kind of the requirement to be on the summit. And it's like, that's a fine line, right? Where if you think I'm the best fit, you should have me on. If you think I'm what's best for the audience, you should have me on. If you don't, that's a different conversation. That it's that balance of how do you do what's best for others and do what's best for yourself. I think that's just an example of, but see, here's the interesting thing. I was like, no stress. Cool, whatever. I don't care. No stress. I completely understand you're doing your thing. I'm going to go do my thing. I'm not offended. I don't feel rejected because it's not about me. You're not having me on because of me. It's not about me. It's because we're not, whatever, successful enough or in that regard, whatever it is. It's not a me thing. It's a everybody else thing, I guess. I don't know. But I want to tell that story just because, that helped me get over it. Rejection, like a level of that rejection, that's one of my fears. But that wasn't about me. It wasn't about me. And honestly, more than anything, I'm sad that I don't get to add value to whoever was going to tune in.
Yeah, definitely.
It's more that than whatever,
There's a big difference between, and this will be the last piece that I say, what's your syntax? What's your syntax? Is it self first, others second? Or is it others first, self second? It needs to be both, and you need to harmonize them. And I think that in some ways you need to pivot. When you're alone, you got to do obviously self first. But when you're with others, what is the purpose, right? This podcast, the purpose of this podcast is to add value to our listeners first. Yep. Secondary is to profit so we can keep podcasting. See how the syntax matters? Now imagine if we flipped it. Imagine, Kev, if the first priority was making a profit. See how interesting that everything would shift. Now all of a sudden it's about us, it's about our products and our services. It's not about the listener. I really want the listener's life to improve. That's what I think about it all the time. Like, how can I remember one time we had a listener who listened to 400 episodes of our show, and I came to Kevin and I said, our show sucks, man. We need to do better. And what I meant by that wasn't that our show sucks. Our show doesn't suck. But it's like, this dude needs more help. And we obviously have not helped him enough. 400 episodes, he's still at the very beginning of his journey, and there's a lot of things that are not landing well. And now, in hindsight, I know why. We weren't very strong, in comparison to now. But I mean it. I'll say this, like, this podcast needs to be the most helpful podcast on the planet. I care about that more than anything else. I actually want your real life to improve. Like, if your life is not improving listening to this show, I feel so like a failure in that. Like, that is the point of this. That is the whole point of this. Now, do we also need to be profitable? Do we also need to grow and scale the business? Do we also need to pay ourselves and the team? Do we also need to, of course. And that's the snowball, and you need all of it. But for you, and this is an analogy here, in your life, are you focused on serving others? Are you focused on adding value? Are you focused on growth and becoming more valuable so you can add more value? Or are you so busy focused on looking good that it actually is at the expense of your own fulfillment because now you're not serving? When you're so embarrassed or scared or self-conscious, typically, and we've all been there, myself included, typically we're not adding value. We're not getting better. When you're self-conscious, you're not going outside your comfort zone. You're not trying to meet people. You're not trying to add value to their lives. You're not trying to build relationships. You're not trying to read books. When you're self-conscious, you're like in a shell. You're scarce rather than abundant. You're not expansing. It's expansive. When you're others conscious, you expand. When I pour into Kevin's world, now I get smarter too. He gets better, I get better. Now we're both become more. Now we have more value to give. It's this beautiful upward spiral, assuming that you also take care of yourself behind the scenes. And that's the one sort of caveat asterisk that I would put.
Caveat.
It's
an interesting word.
It's a good one.
Asterisk.
That's
another interesting word.
Fair assessment.
You have any other interesting words?
Commiserate.
Commiserate. What about
I don't
totalitarianism?
Totalitarianism.
That's a nice word.
Not bad.
Okay, we're gonna go. If you listen to this show and you want to help us out, and we are helping you every single day, that's the goal. If you find value in what we do, please subscribe on the platform you listen to us on. That will help us get on the top charts. So there's actually 3 things that matter when it comes to charting for your podcast. That is one of them. So if you listen to us every day, please subscribe so you will never miss an episode. On Apple, I think there's a plus sign. On Spotify, I think it says follow, but we would appreciate it very much.
I had a email that I wanted to read really quickly, super fast, because I'm so pumped that this came through. Kev, you showed me this today, and I'm super grateful. So let me just read it real quick, because it means the world to us when you do reach out and share these things. Let me see if I can find it. I apologize. I should have had this up. Okay, here we go. All right, so I'm going to read this very quickly. Whoop. Hey, Kevin, I wanted to send a quick shout out to you and Alan. I go through fits and starts listening to your podcast. I can listen to music when I work, but with you two, I want to be able to focus. Appreciate it, brother. Overall, it is rather impressive. You have absolutely hit a few chords and nerves with me, and it has forced me to put some aspects of my life into perspective. There's some other things. Please share with Alan that I have been going through his book recommendations, and they are quite good, so please pass that on. Thank you. And then he did give some feedback of we essentially have been a little bit rushed on this podcast, so we are going to be working on that. So thank you for the constructive feedback. You know who you are. It means everything to us when we receive messages like that, because what that person was saying is your podcast has helped me change my life, and that is the purpose. And so that's it. Everything we do is that, and I hope that we are also inspiring other people to live a life of service, not at the expense of you, but in alignment with your purpose, in alignment with your passion, in alignment with what fulfills you, what fills you up. And so thank you so much for the person who did reach out, and I think this episode hit a chord with me, Kev, because we weren't planning on doing it, but I witness a lot of people who are so wonderful and service driven, and they've grown so much and contributed so much that they get attacked. And often they're getting attacked by very self-conscious people. And I think that those self-conscious people would, if they actually focused outward and served others and tried to add value, they'd be surprised at how much comes back.
Shout out to Corey. I met Corey at Podfest, a wonderful human being. Spent my days hanging out with him. Really, really cool guy. So appreciate you, Cor. You're a good dude. Tomorrow for episode number 1330. I try to take 200 away. Does your family actually value you? That's going to be a heavy episode, but I know most of us will benefit from it. As always, we love you, appreciate you, grateful for each and every one of you. And at NLU, we do not have fans. We have family. We will talk to you all tomorrow.
Stay in service. Next Level Nation.